Hi everyone. On behalf of the LL.M board, I would like to thank you all for coming today and thanks our speakers who agreed to be with us today. Ahlan wa sahlan. Today is an important day and every day as we continue to fight. I have learned that in life you can die quickly or you can die slowly. For many of us, the Egyptians, the privileged few, even though we had our immediate needs met, we were dying slowly. We were dying slowly from the abuses that denied so many the right to have their most basic needs met, the right to life and liberty. And our growing anger over that sure slow death and those abuses was seething just beneath the surface for many years. Oh yes, sometimes the anger would fuel over, causing unexpected outbursts of resistance, but the sustained, uncontrolled fury finally exploded on January 25, 2011. The revolution it began could not be put out. We wanted freedom, we wanted social justice, and we wanted human dignity. Egyptians throughout the country took to the streets demonstrating against these abuses and were more than ready to give up their lives to achieve these goals. Even though at times our vision was not always clear or well articulated in our hearts, we knew that losing our lives would be heroic if we could change the course of future in the country we love so much to give everyone the future they deserve. That was a seminal day in my life. I learned the cost of freedom that day. I tasted the bittersweet victory that comes with the loss of family, friends, fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, sons, and daughters. I saw firsthand the sacrifice that many gave in the streets that day, so that others could have a better life. Their lives continue in the battles we still fight. Those of us who began this revolution and continue to protest have vowed not to let their sacrifice be forgotten. For we have learned over the past 2 years that far too many have given so much, so we come too far to turn back now. Building a new country, a new democracy, getting rid of the abuses that dominated the last 3 decades, the corruption, the iniquities will not be easy, nor does it come quickly. But we are learning and better understanding that it's going to take time to build the country we want. But we rejoice in knowing that for the first time in Egypt's long history, the future and the power the future and the power to create change is in the people's hands. The youth of Egypt can take pride in knowing that they have played an important role in this process. They have demonstrated their leadership in this revolution and their ability to gather around the cause. They have shown to the world that has watched this growing awe what can be accomplished with commitment. Today, Egypt has a new president that, in my opinion, has failed to gather people from different ideologies around them. Today, Egypt has a new constitution that, in my opinion, has not changed to be considered a post-revolution constitution and has many issues regarding women's rights, military power, freedom of speech, and many others that we will discuss in this panel today. As we look back at the events of the revolution that began 2 years ago with our striking victory in Tahrir Square, we need to look at what we've accomplished, but we also need to continually remind ourselves of what remains to be done. Yes, you can die quickly or you can die slowly. I learned that day in Tahrir Square there are many things worth dying for. I'm proud I was part of what was begun that day. I'm proud that we continue to fight for our goals and the vision that drove us to the streets. I'm proud that so many Egyptians were willing to face a quick death in order to give a full life, a rewarding life, an equal life to everyone in Egypt. Please join me in welcoming our speakers for the first panel on Egypt's new constitution, Professor Dr. Mohamed Mattar, Executive Director of the Protection Project at the Johns Hopkins University, and Mr. Holger Albrech, Senior Research Fellow at United States Institute of Peace. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم delighted to be here. Rana is a good friend of the protection project. She came and she did some good work last semester. I really appreciate it. I want to thank the LL.M board for inviting me. I am not a stranger to this school. I teach here. Every semester I teach, but I decided not to teach this semester, but next semester I'll be teaching my course on international contract law. I see some of my students here, so I want to welcome them, especially those who are from Syria. Yeah, because Syria has a lot of problems. Every time I see somebody from Syria, I say, my goodness, God help you, and God help Syria. Rana asked me to talk about the Egyptian constitution. And I remember taking an airplane and going to Egypt for the sole purpose of voting on the new constitution. 63% voted yes, and almost 36% voted no. And this is how I see the Egyptian society nowadays. I see almost 60 plus who are in favor of stability. Let's just give the process a chance to succeed. We proudly voted for a president. Maybe you don't like his looks. Maybe you don't like his beard, but he was elected by the people. So give him a chance. Let him rule for 4 years, and maybe for 4 more years. And if you don't like him, you can kick him out after 4 years, or you can kick him out after 8 years. This is my belief. And this is how I see the constitutional process. I know that some of you would say, well, but really not every Egyptian participated in the constitution making process. So that would be my first point to raise. Because to have a constitution, you got to have a democratic process. This is what we call the principle of participation. Now we had problems with the Constitutional Court, was the first committee, and then the second committee, and 100. And the question was, women represented enough? How about Coptic? How about constitutional scholars and so on? I see that the committee was established in accordance with the Egyptian law and was valid. Although some withdrew at the final drafting stage. So that would be my first question to you. Did we all participate in the constitutional making process? My answer would be, my opinion, according to the law, yes, but others have a different opinion. The second question, and Jennifer knows the second question because she wrote that second question for me, whether the constitution reflects the aspiration of the Egyptian people, the revolution. And when you read the preamble, and I am one of those who believe in preambles to constitutions. I just got a copy of a book written on the binding effect of preambles, and preambles are part of the Constitution itself. The preamble declares that this is the revolution document. This is the document of that reflects the Egyptian revolution. Do you see it this way? That would be my second question to you. But I would refer to Article 65, which explicitly states that it is the obligation of the Egyptian state to take care of those who died and those who are injured, their families, their parents, the girls, the daughters, the sons, and help them with employment opportunities and so on. So I see that Article 65 is a positive, one of these good provisions in the Constitution. But the question remains, is this Constitution reflective of what the people were asking for? Basically freedom. Because I am one of those who witnessed the Mubarak era for 30 plus years. And I did not go to prison, but my brother did. He spent a year in prison. I remember the state police coming to our house, and my dad, who was 85 years old, still doing well, being harassed and humiliated. I know that. So I'm really surprised too much. For those who are criticizing 6 months and not being patient, where were these people 30 years during the Mubarak era? Give the democratic process a chance. That's how I see it, although, as you're going to see, I have reservations myself regarding the text of the Constitution. So let me start with that. The text itself. How is the Constitution here? What do you think about the text of the Constitution? Mixed feelings, and mixed reactions, and mixed responses. So some start with what you mentioned, the religious rights, and Article 43. It talks about you and I have the right to worship and practice religion as long as we are members of the divine religions. So basically Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So human rights advocates come and say, how about the Baha'is? And I teach Islamic law, and I talk about that. I am a believer in that give everyone a chance and give everyone the right to practice his or her religion. So Article 43 talks about divine religions. Is this good or bad? I leave this to you. I'd like to be inclusive. I want to include everybody. And that's why I don't like the provision in the Constitution that excludes members of the dissolved Democratic National Party. 10 years, you're not allowed to engage in any political activity if you were a member of the Democratic National Party. I am against that. I am for tolerance. I am against trials and all that. I am for reconciliation, including those who worked for Mubarak and with Mubarak. I'm against corruption. Bring the money back, and let's live happily. I know that this is a controversial issue, but I think it is time for us to get together. I was watching Wael Ibrahim yesterday, the Live Fest today, and he had Ayman Noor. And Ayman Noor said, I am calling for love. I want people to love each other. And I agree with him. I don't like what is happening in Tahrir nowadays. I don't like the demonstrations nowadays, coming and saying, let's get rid of this president. Till when are we going to get rid of those who I don't see it as the right way, the right path to take. I don't see it. I think let him rule 4 years and then kick him out if you don't like him. Ayman Noor was talking about the anger, and that's why he's being criticized, because he's not with Amr Musa and El-Baradei and Hamdin Sabah. He is taking another route, the route that I support. Let's just call for love. Too much anger, and I don't think this is in the interest of the Egyptian people. Too many articles that have been criticized in limiting rights of others. I refer to 219, defining Islamic Sharia to include the Sunni doctrine. So how about Shia? As you all know, I travel to Iran all the time. I'm not Shia, but I am for everybody, bring everybody. So I don't see a reason for exclusion, whether we're talking about members of the old guard or Baha'is or Shia. I don't see that, and there's no need to define that in a constitution. Having said that, if you take a look at the provisions of the Constitution, and I was with George Ishaq in Egypt 2 months ago or so, and he told me there are 52 provisions that he doesn't like in the Constitution. I don't see the 52. I came from Italy. I had a conference on Arab constitutionalism. We discussed all the constitutions, including Moroccan, Jordanian, Tunisian, and I claim that the best, and I don't like to use the word best, but our constitution is really good. The Egyptian constitution is excellent. Coming from a rich background, build on what is good, always. And then if you don't like a provision or 2 or 5 or 10, there is a way of amending these provisions, and if you cannot amend them, there is a way of interpreting them. Because the Baha'i thing was interpreted in accordance with the old constitution, and we have decisions by the Egyptian Supreme Constitutional Court, we have decisions by the Administrative Court, so it's a matter of interpretation. But I would argue that the Constitution in its entirety, if you read the provisions altogether, I think they're much, much, much better than the 71 Constitution. And it's much, much, much better than the Jordanian Constitution. And I claim it's much better than the Moroccan Constitution. And it's much better than the draft Tunisian Constitution that we took at it. So I think there's a lot of positive. And Rana knows this is my character. I always focus on the positive, not the negative. So maybe I'm influenced by the way I look at things. I don't look at, where the behavior is okay, well, let's interpret the provision in a certain way. So since I am talking about the good, let me refer to you to some of the good accomplishments, constitutional accomplishments, that we have under the new Egyptian constitution. As you all know...
I'm sorry, I just want to check, is the mic, is everyone's hearing?
Yeah. Can you hear me over there? You hear me?
Yeah, just to keep like a little bit, because people will say,
sure.
Thank
now
you.
I'm talking about the good, everybody has to listen. All right. My work at the Protection Project for 13 years is on the issue of human trafficking. This is my big piece. And I was very proud of Egypt that passed the law number 64, 2010. I worked with those who worked on the law. And then when the Constitution was out, I wanted to know, where is my issue in the Constitution? How can I see myself in the Constitution? And I claim, again, you can challenge me, the Egyptian Constitution provides the best model of a constitution in combating human trafficking. The best. Out of the 196 constitutions, and I collected all the constitutions and checked human trafficking. Article 73 prohibits oppression, human exploitation, sex trade. Of course, someone would come and say, where is the term human trafficking? You have to cover that article. For the first time, and that's the only constitution in the world that prohibits trafficking in human organs. Nowhere else you find a provision in prohibiting trafficking in human organs. There is a provision that prohibits forced labor. There is a provision that prohibits child labor. I know it's being criticized, but it takes into consideration the realities of the Egyptian community. There is a provision that prohibits using people in experiments, medical experiments and so on. You put all that together, and then you have a constitutional protection of victims of trafficking. And I'm writing an article on that because I was really inspired, by the Constitution when it comes to the issue of human trafficking. Add to that Article 51. You're all familiar with what happened to American NGOs. They go to Egypt, they apply for registration, the government doesn't respond, and then they arrest them after 4 or 5 years because they are exercising, they're doing activities in Egypt. And I used to work with them. I'm one of them. Now 51, for the first time, shift of the requirement from registration to notification. So I pick up the phone, and I say I am going to establish an NGO to combat human trafficking, I do not have to wait for the Egyptian government to approve my request for registration. That is a big accomplishment. Article 80 also really is a very good article because it says no statute of limitation. No more statute of limitation. If you are filing a lawsuit, or if there is a criminal action or a civil action that involve one of these constitutional rights, violations of one of these constitutional rights, no more statute of limitations. Quite an accomplishment. Article 148 talks about the emergency rule. We had emergency rule for 30 plus years. Under 148, emergency rule may be declared. That's fine, but only for 6 months. And if the president wants another 6 months, he has to go and get the approval of the people in a referendum, and only for another 6 months. Quite an accomplishment for 30 years in emergency rule, and then he has to consult the government. I would have liked a provision there that says declaration of emergency rule does not suspend any of these constitutional rights, but there is another provision that says that none of these constitutional rights may be suspended. I would apply this provision to also any period of an emergency rule. The list is long because I see good in the Constitution, and I know that I am perhaps going to be attacked because, yes, most of those I talk to don't like the Constitution for some reason which I really don't understand. I think they don't like the Constitution because they don't like those who wrote the Constitution. They don't like the Constitution because they don't like the person who is in charge of implementing the Constitution. They just don't like the idea of Muslim Brotherhood taking over and ruling the country. They have problems with that. So when the declaration, the constitutional declaration was abolished, they still didn't like that. If we got them their constitution, they're still going to riot in the streets. They do not like Mohamed Morsi ruling the country. This is how I see it. Now, women's rights. I'm not going to be long because I know you told me to be brief, but she mentioned women's rights. I have the total opinion, the opposite opinion. Compare women's rights in the old constitution to women's rights here, we accomplished a lot. I know, and I am against the idea that we do not have quota for women. I am for quota, especially in the Egyptian society. We have problems. We do not believe in women, and we do not believe in women's rights. Men don't like women for some reason in all of the Arab world. And like King Abdullah came out and he said, here, 30 women and the Shura Council. And I was reading Al-Quds al-Arabi, and they said, my goodness, you're having Shura Council, women in the Shura Council, and they cannot drive. You have women in the Shura Council, but does the Shura Council have any legislative powers? See, this is how you can address the issue for both sides. I think what happened in Saudi Arabia is quite a huge accomplishment. Let's build on it, and next step we'll say, okay, how they're going to go to the Shura Council. We don't want drivers, we want them to drive. This is how I see things, and I think this is how we should be thinking about what is happening in Egypt. Go to the preamble. The preamble says women and men are partners. So you have a constitutional principle that says men and women are partners. And then a constitutional principle that says women and men are equal. And they have equal opportunities, men and women. So you have a constitutional principle in the preamble itself for the first time that says men and women are the same, they're partners, they're equal, equality, equal opportunities. And then you have the non-discrimination clause, and this is the problem now. Those who advocate for women's rights say, where is the word sex? You know, Egyptians don't like sex very much. Where is the word gender? I don't understand what gender is. So we don't have the traditional non-discrimination clause, no discrimination on based sex, gender, race. The best thing is to say no discrimination, and you put full stop period. That's the best drafting. And that is Article 43, citizens are equal before the law. You have the Constitution principle. Talks about women and men. They're all the same. Equality, equal opportunities. And then you have the non-discrimination clause. And I was talking to a constitutional scholar in Italy at my conference. It was an amazing conference because the Jordanian constitution doesn't even have any reference to women whatsoever. But I would have liked maybe the quota. We kept the Ummal and Fallahin, the farmers and the workers, 50% for one more term. I would have liked to see the 64 seats for women kept for women in the parliament. And I went to Egypt and I said, if you do not have money to buy seats, I can get them for you and ship them from the United States of America. Keep the quota system. They did not listen to me. They don't listen to me. Yeah, sometimes they do, but most of the time they don't. So, but women's rights, from a constitutional drafting perspective, it is quite an accomplishment from the Constitution of 71. And then you have a provision that talks about women who are widows and women who are divorced. And so, quite an accomplishment. I know that liberals don't like a conservative society. That is what some are arguing, that this constitution provides for a conservative society. They refer to Article 6, and I know Rana won't like Article 6. Because Rana and I, we don't see the same. When it comes to Article 6, talks about reconciling the role of women toward her family and the role of women working. We are itchy about that. That idea, okay, because in our society, we believe in family, and we believe that the first role for women is to take care of her family, and then definitely she can go be educated and work. Article 6, and it was in the old constitution, but liberals don't like to see this conservative vision of the Egyptian society. Women at home, you can say women in binders, but you can't say women in families, So yes, Article, and that's why he lost the election. He said women in binders, and everybody said, my goodness, you're not really treating women with respect. Article 6, and then you have Article 10. I was in Italy, and a professor, a chair of the history department in American University in Cairo, and he said, what is this genuine character of the Egyptian family? At-Tabi' al-Asir. This was the old constitution. But he thinks, genuine character, are we going to allow for early marriage and all this, what you hear, people interpreting the constitution in a way that the constitution doesn't really refer to any of that. I will end with Islam, because I was in New Orleans, Louisiana. You can tell I travel a lot. Every week I'm somewhere, she knows. So the first week of January, we had the American Association of Law Schools meeting. And then they had something on the Egyptian constitution, and a scholar of law said, my goodness, Article 4 gives Al-Azhar University a constitutional role that perhaps would be contradictory to Article 175 that talks about the Supreme Constitutional Court. And I raised my hand after she finished. I said, did you read Article 4? She said, yes, it talks about constitutional role. I said, it doesn't. It says, Al-Azhar shall be consulted in matters related to Islamic Sharia. Yes, maybe you disagree with this, but don't tell me that Al-Azhar University, Al-Azhar, which is the oldest learning institution in the world, will have a constitutional role that would contradict 175 and the Supreme Constitutional Court. It does not. It says, let's go to Al-Azhar, like when we did with Sukuk. Egyptians want to have Sukuk. I had a conference on Sukuk 2 weeks ago. The only country that has a law in the Arab world with Jordan, so we brought the Jordanian law and we compared Sukuks and so on. But that's, you have 3 references to Islam in the Constitution. That is one of them. Article 4, Al-Azhar is this, should we give Al-Azhar a role? It's all about those who would like to see more a role for Islam and those who do not like to see a role for Islam. The main provision is Article 2 that says Islamic Sharia is the main source of legislation. 11 countries have that. The Constitutional Court has good interpretation of what we consider Islamic Sharia. 219 came and defined that, and it was something that, how about the Shia concept and so on. I don't see a problem. I asked about Article 3. For the first time, the word Christians and the word Jews appear in the Constitution. I thought it's a good thing. If you in Article 2 you talk about Islam, it's good to have something on Christians and Jews in Article 3. I was told the opposite. I was told no, I don't want to be defined by the fact that I'm a Christian or Jewish or a Muslim. I said fine. If you want to delete 3, you have to delete 2. But as long as you have 2, 3 is good. And 3 says Christians and people of the Jewish faith can resort to their laws in areas of personal status and their selection of their spiritual leaders and so on. The third reference to Islam is al-Waqf. For the first time, Islamic trust became part of the Egyptian constitution. I think it's a good thing. I teach comparative law. I taught comparative law here for 3 years. And one of the classes that I cover, Islamic Waqf, as the basis for the common law Waqf. I think it's a good thing to have a provision in Waqf. There are other references, I'm going to stop here. Shura, for example. There is a provision that says the foundation of the society is democracy and shura. Allah. What is the shura thing that you're talking about? And then can you reconcile principles of democracy with principles of shura? That's the Iraqi law talks about democracy and it talks about Islamic Sharia. Can you reconcile both? Well, we have a shura council. I don't see a problem there. But I have a long list of provisions that some are arguing that should not be there. I'm going to end with my favorite provision. And you can tell I have too many favorites. Because the Constitution is cute. Has a lot of good things. Yes. But take the good, interpret it the way I believe in the Supreme Constitutional Court. I used to be a big fan of Awad al-Mur, who wrote really good constitutional court decisions. We're proud of. I know that the Constitutional Court did bad things, but leave the judiciary alone, even if the judiciary, because everybody said, what? The first committee is void? It's not right. And the Constitutional Scholar said, that's not right. But whatever the Constitutional Court does has to bind all of us, and we shouldn't go and second-guess the work of the Constitution. But my favorite article is Article 31. I don't know if Jennifer would like me, but that's my favorite article, Jennifer, because she has another opinion. But 31 says, dignity is the right of every human being. So I had a conference in Qatar in human dignity, because I was in Egypt, and a professor in law told me, what? Human dignity? The whole Constitution is very, talks about just general stuff, and the drafting is bad, and all that. And I sat with the drafting committee, and that's my favorite article. Dignity is the right of every human being, because I believe that the Egyptian revolution and the Constitution, that is the document of the Egyptian revolution, restores dignity to the Egyptian people. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everybody. First, let me thank you for coming, and of course, Rana, for putting this together. This is, I think, a great opportunity to talk again about the Egyptian constitution, but also about topics that, to be frank with you, I'm even more interested because I don't know much about Syria. I should know more because one of my research projects, ongoing research project, is on civil-military relations. So I'm really interested also in the upcoming panels. It's actually, it's also the first time that we have this food here already, and it smells so good. I want to really try and talk a little bit faster. Sometimes I'm hard to stop, Rana. I trust that you just give me a heads up, and if I kind of exceed the 15-20 minutes. So, talking about the Constitution, well, first of all, the question is, question was for me when I was invited, how to talk about the Constitution. I'm a political scientist. I'm not trained in law, and there's certainly different approaches to talking about the revolution. One being to look at the context, right? This is usually what political scientists do. What is the political context within which a constitution comes into being? And the second one is to look a little bit more at the text. I'm certainly not very qualified to look at the text. That's actually your job, I think. I want to try it anyway, because I think not many people have done it, and the discussions haven't really focused much on the text, at least not here in the West. But also, to be frank, in Egypt, a lot of people have focused more so on the context, on the authors of the Constitution. Yes, and there's a real problem, right? I mean, if we don't like the authors of the Constitution, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to also dislike the document, the outcome of the procedure. So, in the West, but also in Egypt, among many Egyptians who talk to representatives of the West from the media, people who go to Cairo. So among these people, there's a strong emphasis on the religious content of the Constitution. I don't want to talk too much because you've already hinted at the articles that are problematic or that are kind of believed to be problematic. And I'm also not talking about the discussions that really kind of took off to include terminology like fascism. It's a fascist constitution. It's a theocracy. It's an Islamic state, and so on and so forth. So I think the reasons, again, is the reasons why the discussions about the Constitution or about the fact that, or the content of the discussion, looking primarily at the religious content, the prime reasons are that, first of all, the authors are Islamists themselves. And the second reason is that there is a stronger emphasis in the current Constitution than in the 1971 document. So we have the Sharia articles 2 and 219. 2 is the old one. It's pretty vague. It doesn't tell us much. 219, I think, probably. Well, again, I'm not really trained in Islamic law at all, but I think, or what people tell me, that this it contains a much more traditional interpretation that was envisaged by people who have drafted the second article. So it's a very technical language, and haven't really digged into it. But it is very clear that this is the article where the Salafi influence is most clear. I think it is probably a little bit more problematic than Mohamed you mentioned, but what is really still not so much of a problem is that, or what is quite strange to me is reading this article on the one hand, on the other hand, there's nobody really addressed, right? The article doesn't address any political institution. It doesn't even address Al-Azhar. It doesn't address the Supreme Constitutional Court. There's no political institution out there that is addressed through this article. So it's kind of a little bit free-floating out there, and people probably in the future will not really know what to do with it. There's the Al-Azhar article, number 4. I think the wording is very important here. It says that Al-Azhar should be consulted in matters pertaining to Islamic law. Consultation does not necessarily mean much, right? I mean, Al-Azhar doesn't have any implementation power as to having its rulings really implemented in the lawmaking process. So also here, this article remains pretty vague. I think Islamists can live very well with this constitution, especially the Salafis. They've apparently pushed pretty hard to have Article 219 included in the Constitution, but also in a way liberals and seculars, if they ever come to power in the future, they will be able to live well and operate with this Constitution. The text in itself is not very problematic in religious terms. There's a stronger emphasis on religion, but if we kind of put this in the context of our discussions and our perception of the Constitution, it means that we actually ignore the whole list of hundreds of articles that focus on something on different themes. You have mentioned some. I will focus on a couple of others. So basically, these articles mean that we have a modern constitution that structures and provides norms for a whole kind of variety of modern state regulations, political institutions, individual rights and liberties of citizens, social and democratic, social and economic development in particular, and so on and so forth. The Constitution has 236 articles. We have 3 looking at Sharia or Islamic law. We have the freedom of belief that you mentioned in 43 and 44. We have other, to be frank, other constitutional articles where religion is mentioned, such as Article 60, that calls for religious education to be included into the curricula. We have number 3, we talked about that, and a couple of other things. But this really doesn't make up for the main character of a constitution that has so much to offer in other terms and in other kind of political contexts. It's a conservative constitution, but conservatism is not necessarily the same as religion, right? It has a stronger religious emphasis, but certainly the Constitution doesn't qualify at all. It doesn't even come close to a blueprint for an Islamic state, as some people out there have wanted to see it. So the fact that it is not a particularly religious constitution doesn't mean that it is a good constitution. No, it is not a good constitution. It is actually a bad, in my view, quite amateurish constitution. It is obvious that it lacks legal expertise. It is better than the 1971 constitution, but again, it is not a good constitution. Not all amateurish constitutions necessarily are path dependent in a way to really bring down a country. If you look at the US Constitution, it's pretty, like the original document is a pretty amateurish attempt. You see that in all the amendments that were necessary actually to make the thing happen and make the thing work. So I think the focus on religion prevents us to really look at the details, and I've kind of put something together, a small text, and I said it's not religion. The devil lies in the details, not in religion. And let me look a little bit at the details very briefly. Why I think that it is not a good constitution, and why I think that it is an amateurish constitution. I have 2 major concerns. One being that the Constitution is a really idiosyncratic mix of, on the one hand, extremely vague articles. We see this in the religious articles, but in a couple of others, and some extremely specific articles. So reading the document is really like, sometimes you read something extremely specific, and you wonder why there are so clear, specific provisions for policymakers of whoever is addressed actually in the particular article. And in some articles, they don't really tell you much. So just a couple of examples. I don't know, I put them down somewhere else. If you look at, for example, Article 61 means that the state has to eradicate illiteracy within 10 years. That should not be in a constitution. I mean, a specific timeline to offer a state to come up with some very, very clear, specific policy provisions. That should not be part of a constitution. Article 66 requires the state to provide opportunities for sports and physical exercise. I live in Cairo. This is going to be difficult to actually implement. Article 184, well, you can play chess, right? I mean, but physical exercise out there, I mean, you have a pretty good chance that it's going to kill you in no time. Article 184 instructs the state to assimilate living standards across the country. So there's some very, very specific stuff out there. Sometimes you wonder why this is there, and we also understand that this is very problematic for future policymakers because they will be measured according to the Constitution. And whatever they do, I mean, you don't really need a crystal ball to understand that whoever runs the country, whether they're Islamist or someone else, they're not going to be able to eradicate illiteracy within 10 years. They might move down the road and be quite successful. But if they don't match that aim that is stated so specifically in the Constitution, their action, their policy making is non-constitutional. And this will provide problems in that it will render these political actors in the future illegitimate. I don't want to go too much into detail because I have another grand topic that I want to talk about. Maybe just briefly to wrap this up, that it's quite problematic in general to come up with these specific prerogatives in a constitution because a constitution is so hard to change. You need two-thirds majorities in both chambers of parliament, Shura Council, and the Majlis al-Sha'ab. That's difficult to accomplish. So yes, we can kick out Mohamed Morsi after 4 years, but the constitution is there to stay. So all what is in there promises to be in there in, say, 10 years from now, down the road, when Morsi is history, and probably his successor is also history, and we don't remember the context in which the constitution came into being, but all what is on paper, all the stuff in there, all these specific prerogatives, specific laws that don't have anything to do with usually a constitution are still in there. The second point I want to make is more serious, I think, and here the political scientist comes back in again in a way. So the Constitution, I want to look at kind of the relationship between the executive part of government and the legislature. So the Constitution is a departure from a previous consensus that executive powers, that is the powers in the presidency, be curbed and be limited. That was a consensus among all political forces in the revolution or in the immediate post-revolutionary transition period in 2011. So the Constitution outlines, if we look at the document, the Constitution outlines a clear, strong presidential system with a very, very strong presidency. And some of the prerogatives here are really problematic. Let me first talk about a couple of things that are not problematic, because we don't want to really throw out the baby with the bathtub. So we have other presidential systems with strong presidential powers, right? Think about France, think about the US, for instance. And we see that there's a lot of kind of articles that are not problematic from a democratic theory point of departure in the Egyptian constitution. Among those are the appointment powers in the judiciary and in the government, articles 139, 147, 166, 173, 176, 199, and 202, right? The president appoints a lot of people out there. That's not problematic. The president also has the power to delegate powers to other institutions. 142, 143, 153 are articles that regulate these presidential powers. The president also formulates policies. That's quite normal in a strong presidential system. 132, 144, 159, and 177 again. And the president has the right to pardon. 149. So you'll find this basically in all strong, powerful presidential systems out there in democracies. What is, in this context, maybe the most problematic article is, again, and we look at the wording of 132 that says the president observes the separation between powers. No, from a democratic theory point of departure, the president does not observe. It's part of the separation of powers. Might be kind of a problem with wording, but it might also hint at kind of the mindset of those who put down the Constitution. Really problematic in the relationship between the presidency and the legislature are four aspects. First, we have de facto veto powers of the president in the lawmaking process. We look at Article 104, and this goes as follows. So we have laws, we have draft laws. They go to Parliament, Parliament approves them, and the president has the right to reject these approved by Parliament draft laws. This rejection can only be overruled with a 2/3 majority in Parliament. Again, that's very hard to accomplish. 2/3, 66%, 67% in Parliament. That's hard to get. And what is worse, even this Article 104 remains very unclear whether the necessity to secure 2/3 in Parliament is in the first chamber or in both chambers only. 104 says only the Majlis al-Sha'ab, so the first chamber of Parliament, should be consulted, whereas Article 102 says in a broader context that in the lawmaking process both chambers should be consulted. So there is some lack of clarity as to the role of Parliament and of parliamentary chambers when it comes to the presidential rejection of draft laws. The second point is related. So we look at the second point pertains to Article 136, presidential elections, right? The problem here is that it remains quite vague in that it says presidential elections are to be regulated by law. So at the time being, we don't have a presidential election law, right? So it's going to be written at one point down the road ahead of the upcoming presidential elections when Mohamed Morsi is going to be able to probably being re-elected. Since there's no presidential election law at the time being, and since the president, as we now just learned, according to Article 104, has de facto veto power in the lawmaking process, it means that the president right now has a very strong influence on the particular law that regulates his own re-elections in a couple of years. That's problematic. What makes 1 minute. What makes matters worse is that the Supreme Constitutional Court also has a say in presidential election laws and legislative election laws. So that's going to be very complicated. Let me just try to summarize in 1 minute or 40 seconds the two other major points or problems that I have with the Constitution. One being, according to Article 150, that the president can rule basically by decree and sideline the parliament. So the president can call for a popular referendum according to 150 on important issues relating to the supreme interests of the state. Well, pretty much everything out there in Egypt will fit this particular decision, right? So if the president wants to sideline parliament in the lawmaking process, he can do it according to Article 150. The fourth point is that some core policy areas such as foreign policy, security, defense are beyond the control of elected institutions, of the parliament, of the people, and they are being discussed in some committees along Articles 141, 145, 146, and so on, and 193. So there are some councils, military councils, that basically work to the effect that some policy arenas, especially foreign policy, is outsourced from the regular political institution. Not everything is bad in this constitution. There's some very, very interesting aspects or articles also that try to balance this relationship a little bit better between parliament and the president. The problem here is that while some are very interesting, and I can go into this in the Q&A if you're interested. So the problem remains, if there is a situation that in French is called cohabitation, that is a majority in parliament from one party and the president is a member of another party, right, and they stand against each other. We have this right now also in the States to some degree. So if we have this, there are articles in place that work to the institutions blocking each other. If, however, there is kind of a coherence in majorities in parliament and the president is from the same party, it means that the president, according to these articles that I have discussed, is way too powerful, that probably also kind of violates some democratic principles. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And as you've seen, we've tried to present different point of views, and we had a third speaker, but unfortunately his car broke down. Things happen, alhamdulillah. So now we open it for questions and answers. So if anyone has any question. Yeah.
Thank you for the interesting comments on the Constitution. Thank you for the interesting comments on the Constitution. I like them, all of them. I mean, the positives and the negatives. I'm a little worried that we are discussing the Constitution, which is a document and draft at the end of the day, and we're not discussing the rules of the game. I'm afraid that in Egypt we have a Constitution nowadays, but political parties and political players do not know how to play the political game until now. And what I mean by this in particular is that you find a government ruled by Muslim Brotherhood, or parliament ruled by Muslim Brotherhood, who, when they intended not to go to the presidential elections, they said that we prefer a parliamentary country, we do not prefer a presidential country. And then when they won the elections on the presidency, they said that no, we prefer a presidential regime. On the other hand, the opponents are very happy to play cards like sexual harassment and like bankruptcy of the country to come down with the regime, which is a very ridiculous idea, because I mean both the topics are very sensitive and they can come down with the whole social and economic structure of the country, and they're willing to play this game just to come down with the Muslim Brotherhood, regardless of whether this will come down with the whole country or not. So how do we work this out? Because the Constitution will not work such issues out. Thank you.
Another question, and then we answer all of them.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Mattar, thank you very much. I'm really pleased that you highlighted that the preamble of the Constitution is an integral part of the Constitution. And if we read it, it put a context to what comes after it. So this is really very important fact. But I have to disagree with one of your comments. We, the Egyptians, love women. The problem is we love them too much to the extent that we need to protect them because we love them too much. But if we give them the freedom of choice and freedom of selection, I think they are wise enough and smart enough to take this decision. And I'll give you an example. My wife is an AUC graduate. She is the President Cup holder for academic achievement for 4 years. She finished her master from UC Davis in international economics. She got her PhD from George Washington University, international economics and contagious. She worked in the International Monetary Fund. She's now leading the policy dialogue in the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in London. If I ask her, what is your aspiration of what you want to do tomorrow, she would say, I would like to spend more time with my kids. I have 12 years old and 5 years old. And if she has the choice, she would stay and pay more attention to these kids than anybody else. So Egyptian women are really smart. Okay, and anybody who claim like, oh, we need to put this in the Constitution, then he doesn't know really about culture. My question to you is, do you really have this level of optimism that we will take the American model of the Constitution in terms of making a 32 amendments? Can we really go to this maturity and change our Constitution? And are we ready from a leadership perspective as well as social intelligence to induce a process of changing the Constitution 32 times hopefully in the near future? Now, regarding Holger, I really understand your comments about and your concern about putting timeline in a Constitution, but if you put it in the context of our major concern and problem in Egypt is education. Over the last 40 and 45 years, we have a systematic way of transforming our society into ignorance. Not just reading and writing, but ignorance in terms of ability to take a decision, ability to evaluate the situation. 10 years is not an issue in the Constitution, because after 10 years, if you achieve your goal, you change it, you take this out. And the example of Brazil, they done it in 10 years. Turkey, they done it in less than 10 years. So there is examples of doing this. And I would say the same thing in terms of sport and so on, because these are fundamental chronic problems that require a 10, 15 years timeline in the Constitution, and then take it out. So what? So these are my comments. Sorry.
Any more questions? Just please take a turn. Thank you.
Hi, I'd just like to thank both of you for speaking. I'm kind of outnumbered here. As an American, I study American constitutional law and also international law. So I guess my question to both of you is, what would you expect the international community to do in sort of engaging Egyptians in how to not only interpret their constitution, but also take pride in their constitution? Because from my perspective as a scholar, the fact that Egyptians may have too much religion in their constitution isn't really surprising to me, nor is it really troubling, because like Americans, at least the constitutional scholars, we view our constitution as scripture, basically. You know, people are always saying it's sacred. There's not really too much of a difference between us as people and the way we think, which sort of reflects what's wonderful about constitutions, and that they're supposed to reflect the desires and aspirations of people. So what can Americans do to have really engage Egyptians and have a way of helping them take pride in their own constitution, and also in helping them to improve it? Thank you.
All very good comments. Reflecting the long-lasting debate, how much should we allow for religion in the Constitution? And I am not sure that I see an expansion of Islamic law in the Constitution the same way you see it happening. To me, the fundamental provision of the Constitution is Article 2 that covers Islamic Sharia. It was there. It has been interpreted many times by the Supreme Constitutional Court. 219 doesn't add too much to me, I don't think. And I don't see an expansion of the role of religion there. Having said that, the question becomes, what's wrong with having more religion in the Constitution? I mean, that's the debate that we're having. I don't see a problem in there. In fact, I am for more religion in the Constitution. I don't see that happen in this Constitution. I don't see a problem. You're talking about the society that is, religion played a role, a huge role in the society. And every time we have elections, those who advocate for religion win. We had this in Tunisia, we have it in Egypt, we had it in Algeria before. Having said that, I am for inclusion. I want everyone to be part of what is happening in Egypt. Morsi represents a party, and I'm really surprised that some come and say, yes, but he's selecting members of his party. No, that's what Obama does. I mean, it's natural that you come and you select those who, and it's natural that you reflect on your opinions and you try to further the philosophy that you run on. It was the selection of the Egyptian people. As I said, wait 4 more years and let's see 3 years and a half. Let's see what's going to happen. Women, again, I am with you that Egyptian women accomplished a lot, but I think we still need to do more about that. I would have liked to see, as a transitional provision, give them the 64 seats at least for 1 term. I would have liked to see that. I would have liked to see Article 145 interpreted differently, because we talk about international conventions and we talk about them, they have the same level of the law. I would have liked to see something like the Moroccan constitution has a provision that says, well, we're all of us going to abide by and implement international law. I don't see this in the Egyptian constitution. 32 amendments or whatever, I don't see it this way. I don't see 32 provisions in the constitution that have to be, and I don't see it this way. I like your presentation very much because you basically proved my point. When it comes to freedoms and rights, I think we're doing very well. If our problem will be a problem of drafting, like you mentioned, I have no problem in this 10 years in the literacy and so on. I don't see it is a problem. But when it comes to rights and freedoms in the Constitution, I think this Constitution is much, much better than the 71 Constitution. And I want you to come and tell me, well, but yes, the rights of the Egyptian people are not fully protected when it comes to, I don't see this happening. I think the Constitution provides an excellent model of protecting rights and freedoms.
So I'm not qualified to talk about Egyptian women. Then let's just move on to talk about the opposition that, as one speaker implied, didn't know how to play and didn't understand the Constitution. I don't think that that's true. These guys, I know most of them quite well. I've written my PhD on the opposition in Egypt. They can read. They certainly read the Constitution. They know what is at stake, and they know how to play Egyptian politics, which is precisely why they don't necessarily have an incentive to play institutionalized politics. This is so because at the time being, they don't have much to win in elections. This is also the reason why the Islamists, and in particular the Muslim Brotherhood, kind of has taken on this stance of moving on with procedural democracy, rule of law, and so on and so forth, because this favors their position at the time being. The major concern is education. Yes, I fully agree. I looked at the 2-3 articles that kind of focused in particular on education. I was shocked to see that they were copied basically from the 1971 Constitution, along with many others, by the way, in the document. One of the articles says that the curriculum of all institutions of higher learning or of all kind of educational institutions in Egypt has to adopt the state curriculum, and also it has to be taught in Arabic. If this is implemented, I'm looking for a new job, right? Because then AUC is going to be closed down. This just, yeah, I mean, if you have a job, just look for it. Anyway, so there's a lot of stuff out there. Again, it plays into one of the points that I wanted to make. It's very precise, it's very specific. It's so specific that if implemented, it really comes to the detriment of a lot of people out there, not only students at AUC, I think. Yeah, I mean, if you look at another topic that is heatedly debated right now, it's the economy. If we take only the fuel subsidies out of the state budget and put it in the education, it doesn't need 10 years to really put Egypt on a really, really good path. Right? Last point. What can the international community do? What can the Americans do? Not much, I'm afraid. Well, maybe I shouldn't be afraid, because of course also the Americans and other countries out there have their own interests. So it's not necessarily always in the interest of Egypt when we have Americans or other countries, other governments intervening in the politics. Well, there's not much to do at the time being, because the whole transition period is so based on a very, very strong sense of nationalism in Egypt that any attempt kind of to intermingle in affairs is probably going to cause some strong reactions within Egyptian society. So I think the Obama administration has taken on a very clever stance to take themselves back a little bit at this point, at the time being. Going back to the Constitution, I would have loved to see Egyptian experts of law being much better kind of integrated in the Constitution and lawmaking process than they were, because they know much better than anybody we could send, probably from Europe or from the US.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry because we're running late, so we still have a 2 minutes presentation from Mr. Ahmed Morsi about to orient us on the foundation, and you can grab food so we can start the second panel. Thank you so much.